Hi viewers, in this presentation I'll highlight 2 resources for each area: vocabulary, reading, writing, graphic organizers, and listening speaking. I'll explain how to use each in my secondary social studies classroom, using examples from the research and my lesson ideas. Let's get started. For our first vocabulary strategy, I chose semantic mapping based on Sedida's 2020 work. Semantic maps help students visually connect a key term to related ideas, people, and events. For example, in a unit on Constitution, students might map terms like Great Compromise or limited government and show how these relate to each other and the larger context of the U.S. government. Students might draw lines for the term Great Compromise to bicameral legislative or to Virginia Plan or New Jersey Plan. No, they're not listed in this example, but you get the idea. Showing those connections clearly on paper or digitally. This really supports a deep understanding of complex social studies vocabulary, especially Tier 2 and Tier 3 words that encounter in primary sources and textbook excerpts. This strategy aligns with literacy standard L1112 RHSS4, which asks students to determine the meanings of words and phrases in context and analyze how authors refine the meaning of a text throughout a text. By mapping these ideas visually, students see how concepts build on one another in historical text, which helps them comprehend and use these terms more confidently in discussing and writing. Next vocabulary strategy is word walls from Townsend and his colleagues. Word walls keep key vocabulary visible, reinforcing academic language through constant exposure. In a social studies classroom, it can be used for Tier 2 and Tier 3 words from suffrage or nationalism or World War II related stuff. Students help build the wall by adding definitions, examples, or sentences that connect the words to what we're learning. They can even write questions using those words in context. This makes the word wall interactive and meaningful, helping students revisit and use new terms throughout the unit. Now on to our first reading tool. From Hilbin's Found Poem Strategy encourages students to practice close reading and text analysis creatively. Students highlight important phrases from primary or secondary historical texts, such as speeches or letters, and arrange them into a poem without changing the words. This not only deepens comprehension, but also helps students connect ideas across the text. This activity aligns with standards requiring students to identify central ideas and summarizing key details accurately. In this example, a found poems were created after reading excerpts from Common Sense. The next example of a reading tool is text annotations. Castellan's text annotations method helps students actively engage with the complex historical text. Students mark key ideas, ask questions, define vocabulary, and note important details in margins or on sticky notes. This breaks down difficult sources and builds critical thinking skills by helping students track their understanding and analyze author bias or perspective. Annotation is especially useful for close reading and group discussion in social studies. To illustrate this idea, look at the annotation example of Sherman's March to the Sea. Now on to our first writing tool, biographical encyclopedia entries. So Fertrell's biographical writing project has students research and write about historical figures' lives within their context. This strengthens writing and chronological reasoning. For example, students might write about George Washington or local historical figures, gathering evidence from primary or secondary sources. This activity supports synthesizing information and developing clear, factual narratives aligned with the social studies content. Now on to our second writing tool. Feature and phrase. Yesterday's news strategy helps students practice summarization and synthesis. After a lecture or reading, students write brief news-style reports on key historical figures, focusing on main points rather than grammar. This method reinforces learning, encourages recall, and connects facts to broader themes. So in this example, students will write yesterday's news summary after the lecture on the French and Indian War and the Treaty of Paris. Students will come up with a creative name for their newspaper, write a headline, and draft a short news article explaining how these events led to colonial unrest. Each student will also include one relevant illustration and a simple advertisement that connects to the topic. Okay, now for our first graphic organizer tool, timelines. So Philpott's timeline strategy enables students to organize historical events chronologically. This visual tool helps learners see cause and effect relationships and patterns over time. Students can create timelines individually or collaborate using paper or digital tools. Timelines are especially effective in social studies units like the Civil Rights Movement or World Wars, helping students make connections and synthesize information. Now for our second tool for our graphic organizers, cause and effect charts help students break down why events happen and what followed. For example, they might map British actions like the Stamp Act and connect them to colonial responses like the Sons of Liberty. This makes complex events clearer, builds analytical skills, and supports writing and discussion. Now for our first listening and speaking tool, academic debate. Amen and colleagues highlight academic debate as a powerful tool for social studies. Students research opposing views, present evidence, and engage in respectful argument on historical questions. This builds critical thinking, public speaking, and discipline-specific writing skills. Debates work well at the unit end to synthesize learning, such as debating whether the American Revolution was truly revolutionary. But this is the example we're going to use today, which is students participating in an academic debate by researching and presenting the major arguments of Federalists and Anti-Federalists during the Constitution ratification. They might develop claims and counterclaims using evidence from sources like the Federalist Papers, practicing clear, formal arguments. Okay, our second listening and speaking tool, Socratic Seminar. So finally, Spencer's Socratic Seminar strategy encourages students to discuss a central question by citing textual evidence and build on a peer's ideas. This activity develops close reading, listening, and speaking skills while fostering student-led inquiry. The teacher facilitates, but students drive the discussion, making it ideal for exploring complex social studies topics like Reconstruction or constitutional interpretation. Here are my APA references. Goodbye.